Hey, welcome to another conversation. I'm here with Craig Barber, who's our Abingdon Campus Pastor. He's on our teaching team, and we're kind of working through this series called At the Movies, where we're taking movies throughout the last, couple decades and finding some key truths in them. And so you chose radio for your movie, for your message, which, probably I cried watching. I mean, did you cry when you watched radio?
I did, especially the scene where he loses his mom. Just crushed me.
Man, that's rough.
Yeah.
But I cry at movies. It's okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody does, but I'm strong enough to admit that, right? So, as we're talking about radio, really the theme that you brought up is in this time that we're given, right? We only have a finite amount of time. How am I going to live?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, when I look at the movie, the thing that stood out to me is it wasn't just a snapshot or a small segment of life that was described, but it was really the beginning of a relationship that became lifelong.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they probably had some struggle in wondering, where are we going to stop this movie? Because the relationship has continued well beyond the movie.
Sure.
And so, there were so many life lessons that I was able to kind of just view through the movie that I thought, man, I want to capture some of that. And in the way of capturing it, I want to live it out, right? They were truly life lessons. And so I just remember several years ago being challenged with this marble illustration. And I think it kind of went through the entire church world. But it was the concept that you're always losing your marbles. And
Sure.
And I remember being challenged to put in a canister one marble for every week that my daughter, between the time now and the time that she was going to walk across the stage and graduate. And then, they said once those marbles are assembled, each week you pull out a marble and put it in your pocket, carry it with you. Now, know at the end of the week, you've got to discard the marble.
Yeah.
And you got to reach in and you've got to pull another one out. And it was so sobering. I thought, what sick mind made me do this, right? But it also made me value time, because time is limited. It's a resource. It's our greatest resource.
Yeah,
you can't buy it. You can't borrow it. And so what are you going to do in the time given?
Yeah, so, in your message, you offer 4 kind of different thoughts on how we live, and it's kind of an acronym. So we'll go through those. So number 1 was L, which was love the overlooked.
Yeah, because, Coach Jones in the movie, he does, I think he begins to see somebody that even the principal said, hey, for 20 years, this young man's been walking the roads. We've had no problems. But that was the problem.
Yeah.
For 20 years, he was overlooked. Nobody saw him.
Yeah.
And so, I think in our world, honestly, we've got a great eye for the flash, for the catchy, for the shiny, for the strongest, the fastest, the best looking.
Sure.
We can always, but that goes back to the beginning of time. It's
always
the shiny fruit.
Thing. Yeah.
It's the shiny fruit that really got us. So, but I think we are always captured by the externals.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of the beauty and internal qualities of people are often overlooked. I think somehow Coach Jones sees that in radio, begins to invest in that. And when he did, it also challenged me to look back at the scripture and see God has a really special place in his heart for those who are often overlooked.
Yeah, that's right.
Whether it's an illustration of the guy at the pool of Bethesda, overlooked.
Yeah.
Or, if it's a guy like Zacchaeus, often overlooked.
For sure.
And then I see his love for orphans, for the widows, for the lonely, for those who are in prison, those that oftentimes our society or our culture will overlook. Yeah. And I think he wants to awaken our hearts to that.
Yeah. So we want to love the overlooked if we're going to live well. The second thing was kind of the I, which is invest in leaders around you.
Yeah. So again, going back, I see Coach Jones. This is pretty cool. Right at the beginning of his relationship with radio, he throws a water bottle to his assistant coach.
Yeah.
This guy named Coach Honeycutt. And he says, Coach, you see that guy standing over there on the other side of the fence in the hot of the day? Go give him some water. I can remember Coach Honeycutt was like, what?
Yeah.
You know, and then later on it's, hey, he invites him into the coach's office and says, hey, would you give this guy a burger, a hamburger? And, you know, it's through that I can see Coach Honeycutt almost questioning, like, what in the world's going on? But he sees the consistent investment and love that I think Coach Jones is showing to radio, and eventually Coach Honeycutt gets it too.
Yeah.
And he makes him the basketball manager. And so, you know, I look at that and I see that, you know, Coach Jones was doing a great job also of raising up another leader and helping this guy to catch on to something that he was a value in his life. And man, I want to be able to do that, right? Sure. I mean, I think all leadership is temporary. So what am I going to do in the time that I've been given?
Right.
I want to, you know, what was given, I want to pass on. And I want to see the next generation of leadership be better than what we were.
And how many times do we see, man, even in recent years, someone who has this incredible leadership capacity has built something monumental and huge, and then it falls apart.
It rose and fell with them.
Because they didn't bring anyone with them.
Yeah.
I love the Andy Stanley quote. I probably say it way too much in life, but that there's always a place for yourself when you replace yourself.
Yes.
In a healthy organization. Maybe not in every organization, but if your organization is healthy, if you can bring up someone to do what you do, you get to do something else, you know? And I think God has called us to a life of community, right? We're not called to isolation. We're not called to you know, solo mission here. We're on doing life together. And if there's not people around you, maybe you're not leading well in reality. Yeah. It may look that way for a moment. You can draw some attention, but if there's not somebody around you that you're leading, who are you? You know, to be a leader, you need to have people around you. So we want to invest in leaders and people around us, which again goes back to seeing people, right?
It does.
It's a removal of that sort of selfish, like it's all about me, when you can realize I can bring someone up beside me because I'm not afraid.
Yeah, I think the best leaders I've seen are those who were not so insecure that they kept people around them at an arm's distance.
Yeah.
But it's the people that were so just comfortable in their own skin that they were willing to say, man, I want to see you not just reach the place, right? I want to see you exceed me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think those are rare qualities, but man, what a great leader and a great investment of time.
It is. That's good. So then V in live would be value doing the right thing. That's easy, right?
Yeah, it's great when the right thing is the easy thing. But
sure.
So when you watch the movie, I think one of the things that stood out to me was just how many different oppositional fronts Coach Jones had to face.
Sure.
And you know, the town in South Carolina where this takes place is very similar to, you know, my hometown in Southwest Virginia. And I look at it, and there's just like barbershop in the movie, and inside the barbershop is like some of the key stakeholders in the town gather, and that's where all the, you know, they have these town hall meetings. This is where the real business happens, is right there in the barbershop. And so, I mean, he experienced some opposition from some of the players, from some of the administration, from the school board, and then certainly from some townsfolks, and specifically one stakeholder who is a banker in the town. And I just, you know, what I loved about Coach Jones was just his resolve. Like, I'm not doing this to win, you know, favors. I'm not doing this to win Coach of the Year.
Sure.
I'm doing this because it's the right thing.
That's right.
This is the right thing. And I think we need more stories like that because, I mean, honestly, when the pressure's on us, it's one thing to read the book. It's one thing to sit down and have, a conversation about it. But it's another thing, I think, in those moments where you realize, I've got to stand here. I have to stand.
Yeah.
I could conform, but if I stand, I also know I'm going to take the heat for it. And I appreciate that in Coach Jones, there was a guy who was willing to say, I'll stand tall through the criticism.
Yeah.
And
it didn't make him more popular.
No,
not
at all.
It was a struggle.
I mean, we look back now on a movie that I think inspires us, but in the moment, I'm sure there was a lot of folks that thought, I'm glad he's moved.
Yeah.
And then others who were heartbroken because they saw a man of integrity.
A few weeks ago, was sitting here talking to Steve, our Bristol campus pastor, and we were talking about, how do we know God's plan for our life? And one of those things was, that it takes time. It's a process, right? It's not just like, oh, you're just going to go here and do this thing. It's like, I don't know, there's going to be some meandering that happens. There's some difficulty and struggle in figuring out what God wants me to do. It's not as easy as, follow this line and you'll be good. And so, in this movie we see struggle. When you think about, that sort of arc of history, it's easy to look back and be like, yeah, Martin Luther's a good guy. It's like, man, he had some,
so clear.
Here I stand, I can do no other, he says to the diet of worms, but that was really hard. He has the entire world forced on him.
Absolutely.
To say that.
Yeah.
And so you look back at the highlight reel and you're like, that's cool. But you don't see the pain that goes into that, of doing what's right over time, and I think, we live in a world that is so fast. Right, it moves so quickly.
Absolutely.
And I think all of us are guilty of that, right? To be a part of that, and it's it's like my internet's out, and I just want to throw my phone. I need a new phone. This is so slow. Get rid of this. It's like, what? This is the fastest thing in the universe. 5 minutes ago, and now it's garbage.
Right.
And so there, if we're gonna live well, we have to. There's a longer arc that we have to look at, which really kind of brings us to the E in live, which is to consider eternity.
Yeah, I mean, this is, in my view, is like the dress rehearsal.
Yeah.
I mean, it is pregame if we're going to use the kind of the athletic illustration from radio.
Yeah.
So there's a much larger game that goes on forever. And that's my faith, is that God has placed in our hearts an awareness in this lifetime that this isn't all that there is something more.
Yeah.
And how do you begin to capture that? There were a couple of things that I really drew from the movie in the person of radio, and a lot of it dealt with the mistreatment that he experienced from one particular player named Johnny.
Right.
Johnny, from the get-go, when he greets radio, it's like I got so mad when I watched that.
Sure.
That portion.
Sure.
And he hog ties them, he gags them, he blindfolds them, and then throws them into this equipment shed and leaves them there in the heat of the day and the dark. And I'm like, I was so mad, and I know it infuriated Coach Jones when he found out what happened. And then later on in the movie, the same player, Johnny, tricks radio to go into the girls' locker room, telling them that one of the coaches wanted to see him in there, and his old motive was to get him in trouble.
Sure.
When I look at that, I'm thinking, I'm ready for Johnny to get his, right?
Yeah.
I'm ready. But when I looked at radio, when asked point blank, who did this to you? He would not, he shows mercy, is what he does. And then later, he not only shows mercy to Johnny because he's willing to take the blame for the locker room incident, and then he also, the whole story of radio is he obviously loves these little radios, these little transistor radios,
right?
And so he gives Johnny a radio. And I'm thinking, it's like, for you and I, would have been like, no big.
Fine.
But for him, it was like a huge gift for him to present this.
Yeah.
And so, and I see grace in that. So I see mercy and grace both shine through in that moment. And I think, man, that's the key to eternity. It's not who I am or what I do. It's not the accolades in my short, brief moment of time here. but it is, do I recognize the mercy and the grace of Jesus Christ?
Yeah, that's good. So, if we're going to pull all this together, how are we going to live? The idea is that life is short and we don't want to leave with regret.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I think the movie, the whole time you're wondering, why did Coach Jones do this?
Yeah.
Right? And there's one brief reply after another that all feel fairly shallow. And then he finally has this conversation with his daughter, and the real reason is given. And that illustration just kind of stuck with me, because at the end of it, he just says, what haunts me is that I look back on this portion of my life and I did nothing. I did nothing. And so the prompting into his relationship with radio is basically because he didn't want to face that regret again. And so, wherever it is that I think God is calling you, calling me, I think the real key is I don't want to miss, in this brief amount of time, I don't want to miss what is most significant, what is most meaningful, as God has shared with us.
And when I think about all of this, and you think about life, I think so many times we're waiting for the next big thing, and we miss the actual thing that could have been the thing that led to the big thing. And Scripture's clear that God says if we're faithful in those small things, then He's going to give us more, right?
Absolutely.
And so if we're always waiting for the next thing, the next ticket, the next big thing in our life, we're going to miss those people like radio. We're going to miss those opportunities that could be a defining thing for us. And so really that's my encouragement today, wherever you're listening to this, is that don't forget where you're at now. Don't look past the people that are around you, the people that you have to lead, because you are a leader in whatever capacity you're in. If you're in middle school, if you're in high school, or if you're an adult, wherever you are a leader to someone around you, because whoever's around you is who you have influence on. And so use that wisely, and remember that life is short, all right? It's going to end. Well, Craig, thank you so much for being here on this conversation. If you haven't seen Radio, you should go and watch it. It's a great film. And thanks for kind of closing out our At the Movies series. If you want to see any of our content from other messages from Craig and our teaching team, you can go to our website, hf.church, or you can check out our podcast. And as always, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you're going to get these videos and all kinds of other content each week. So thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, James.